Today's social media segment is brought to you by Terrebonne General Health Systems, modern technology, and timeless caring. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bork, know your rights. Right, every time I hear that music, I want to open up. It's good vibes. With Debbie Cox DeNova. How you doing, Debbie?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
Transformation coach, and we're going to talk today about getting more stuff done.
Yes.
My God, I'm cramming everything into the days already.
You're part of the 1%.
But I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to listen. So how do people get more stuff done?
So this is a conversation about productivity. So the people that I work with that come to me for coaching, they're doing things throughout the day, but at the end of the day, the most important things that move the needle are not being done. And so we're going to talk today about how to utilize the same 24 hours that everybody else has to get the stuff done that is actually going to make a difference to the quality of your life at the end of the day. So, and people are very confused. They're like, I know what to do. And it's not going to be that hard, but for some reason, every day passes and I'm not doing it, right? And so we're going to talk about some of the effects about why that is. But the first thing to note is that when we're talking about productivity when it comes to business, it's important that you clean your desk. Okay, we're just going to start by cleaning up the environment. People think this is not a big deal, but in fact, you are 94% more likely to be productive if you have a clean desk. Right? And so people who have messy desks tend to be more tired, tend to be more likely to be depressed. And it really does add up to something that impacts your productivity. I am actually super guilty of this. Like when I start working on something, it's organized chaos. I've got this stack, right? But so if you spend 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the evening, making sure that your desk looks tidy before you start, it will actually influence the way that you are productive in the day.
Me and my desk have a complicated relationship.
Yes, I can relate to that.
Some days it's clean, other days I ain't fooling with it.
Yeah.
I make a stack. It drives Joni crazy. I got a stack. And then on a given day, I'll go through the stack.
Yeah.
But I have to be really psyched up to go through it.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. 100%. So this is just kind of one of those things to play with and see if you start spending 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the evening, just making sure the desk is completely clean right before you start working. And at the end of the day, like organizing, maybe
good luck.
It'll change something.
I'm not in the 1%.
You are in the 1%. But let's talk about the Acrasia law. We've talked about this a couple of years ago, we talked about this. The Acrasia effect is this tendency to do things against our better judgment. And it's a human effect, okay? And so we want to learn how to combat the Acrasia effect. And so one of the things I want to encourage is for you to find your pink shawl. I told this story before. Some of you may not have heard it already, and you may or may not remember. But the author, Victor Hugo, was in the 1800s, he was under a very stressful deadline. His publisher had given him 12 months, a full year, to complete a new book, to get a new book published. And he spent that year just, entertaining guests and doing other things, so that by the end of the year, there was no book, and he hadn't even started. And of course, his publisher was very annoyed, so set an aggressive deadline of less than 6 months away. You have to have a book. So in order to motivate himself past the Acrasia effect, that tendency to just kind of goof off, Victor Hugo did something kind of extreme. He gave all of his clothes, except for one pink shawl, all of his clothes to his assistant and told her to lock it up. Lock it away. And he spent the entire winter locked in his study with only a pink shawl, writing this book. And what happened as a result is that The Hunchback of Notre Dame was written 2 weeks ahead of time and published in 1831. So if you know that first of all, just understand that the Acrasia effect is a thing that human beings deal with. We end up procrastinating, right? We know we're supposed to be doing this, but we're going to do this instead. We're Netflixing instead of writing the book that we said we were going to do, or whatever, right? So find your pink pink shawl? What is it that you can use to actually make it so that the stakes are higher, that you're actually, like, you could actually create a bet. We talked about this, a bet with your friend, if you have different political views, that if you lose the bet, if you don't do what you said you were going to do, that you'll actually donate $500 to the candidate that you don't want, right? Something like that raises the stakes for yourself, and you're kind of playing with it and going, you know what? I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do, and I'm going to battle against this tendency in a way that's productive instead of going, why?
You can do that with diets too. I know people that challenge each other.
Yep.
That if I lose more weight than you, then you got to give $10,000 to this charity, which is my charity, and vice versa.
Yes, isn't that crazy? So it's fun. It makes it fun, right? The other thing you should know is about Parkinson's law, and this is an old adage that says work will expand to fill the amount of time allotted. So he tells a story about a woman who was tasked to write a postcard. How long do you think writing a postcard should take the average person?
A minute.
A minute, maybe a couple minutes, right? So what happened was that she spent an hour finding the card. She spent a half hour looking for her glasses. She spent 90 minutes writing the card. She spent 20 minutes deciding whether or not to take an umbrella to walk to the mailbox. And long story short, this woman filled up an entire day working on the one task of just writing a postcard and
That's a
sending it.
woman I do not want to have a relationship with.
But this is a tendency that we all have. If we give ourselves 2 weeks to do a thing, we're going to fill
Take
up the
2 weeks.
entire 2 weeks, right? If we give ourselves 10 minutes, and I know people at home can understand, it's like you have guests coming, surprise guests coming. You're cleaning up the house that took you weeks, you've been putting it off. You clean up that house in 10 minutes straight. So basically what you want to do is decide ahead of time, how long is this going to take? And actually allot yourself that amount of time, block it out on your calendar, and actually keep that deadline. So if you set those deadlines in a short period of time, you'll find yourself getting more stuff done.
So if you're a woman and you're very smart, set a big party at the house, the husband will go pressure wash.
There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He has too much pride. He wants the house to look good.
That's it. There you go.
All right.
Exactly.
We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Very important topic. Get your notes out. See ya. Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough. All right, we're back with Debbie Cox-DeNova. The subject today, getting more stuff done. All right, so you're on a beach.
Yeah.
You come and see a little lantern, you rub it. A very beautiful genie pops out. And she tells me, if in 2 weeks you lose 30 pounds, then I'm yours. At that point, I am running down that beach every hour until I get it. That might be hard to lose 30 pounds in 2 weeks, but I sure as hell will try.
That's great. I love that. Yes, exactly. So that might be a thing that helps you get past the acrasia effect. But depending on how beautiful she is, or that motivation might actually wear out. So one thing to keep in mind if you are running on the beach is that you focus on developing discipline, prioritizing discipline over motivation. So you can keep the motivation. What typically happens though is the motivation at first feels really good, like, oh, right? Or you hear a speech and it kind of gets you going. But over time, what typically happens is that motivation kind of peters off. So if you're using motivation to keep yourself going, then oftentimes you're kind of like, oh, well, the genie can be for somebody else, right? I'm tired of this.
Netflix and get fat.
Exactly. So the thing to focus on then is the discipline, being able to actually say to yourself, remember how we talked about the motivation cycle, how it doesn't actually begin with motivation, right? It begins with action of any kind. Once you do the action, then you get an internal reward. So let's say you start running on the beach. Now you're like, the intrinsic reward could be like, I did that. I'm actually the type of person who runs on the beach now. Like I'm going to wake up every morning, I'm going to do this. And then comes the motivation, right? So motivation starts with action, goes to reward, and then motivation, and it continues on like that. So very, very good to have that initial motivation, but to remember that if you keep that as the center point, in all likelihood, you're likely to peter out.
Did you have to ruin my thing about the genie?
You can still have the genie. I'm just telling you how to get it better.
The genie's back in the bottle.
Okay, so some other things to remember are the paper cut problem. So it's too many small yeses can actually bleed you out. We all know that we have these finite resources of time and energy, money, focus, attention. And so if we are saying yes to a bunch of little tiny things, it's kind of like a paper cut. You get one. That's a little annoying, right? But imagine continuing to do that over and over again. You would bleed out eventually, right? So what we want to make sure is that we are saying yes to the things that are actually relevant to what we are doing. And so we've talked about the Eisenhower matrix before. It's covered in Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If at home this doesn't sound familiar to you, take a piece of paper, write at the top of the paper, urgent and not urgent. Do you remember this? Line down the middle, urgent, not urgent. And then a line across. And at the top, you're going to write important and then not important. Okay, so this is going to create a matrix of sorts. And we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm just going to tell you that in the urgent and important, you want to do that. So write do. Okay. In the non-urgent and important, you're going to decide. You're going to decide whether or not to do that, whether to delegate it out. In the urgent and not important, you're going to delegate that out. All right, whether it's a person or you're doing automation. And then in the not urgent and not important, you're probably going to want to brutally delete. Okay, so do, decide, delegate, delete. All right, and those are things that can help you to spend your time on the things that matter the most.
I do that mentally every day.
I love that.
Every day.
See, that's why you're part of the 1%.
Well, but I'm not saying I always get to every urgent.
Yes, but it's a good thing to kind of keep in mind so you're prioritizing. Mark Twain says, if you have to eat a frog, eat him in the morning. And if you have to eat 2, eat the big one first, right? And so you're going to do, because oftentimes we spend our time prioritizing the thing that is not actually going to be the most important thing. It's not usually the glitzy, glamorous thing that we should be putting our attention on. It's the ugly thing we don't feel like doing. That's usually
how do you eat an elephant, remember?
One bite at a
That's
time.
it.
That's it. Right. So if you can make a commitment every single morning to eat a frog, right? Like, and if you have 2, eat the big one first. Do the thing, because that's usually, so if you're running a company or if you have a business, that means it's the revenue, it's the stuff that's actually going to move your revenue, right? So organizing the desk is important, but don't spend too much time doing that. We're checking off tasks that don't move the bottom line, then what's the point, right? So it's usually going and actually asking for the business, doing the thing that actually feels the stickiest. It's also really important to note that, like, people think that when there's a problem, right, and it presents an obstacle to us. And a lot of people get stopped there. Or there's a belief that once I get past this problem, I will have no more problems. But really, in the life of progress, the way that it works is like a video game. You meet one level, right? You take care of one problem, and you up level. You up level as a person, the problems also get bigger. And so the game of life, if you are in the game of progress, is to recognize that the goal is not to run from the problem or or get over problems completely. There always will be problems. But if you're a size 10, you can take on a size 10 problem. And the way that you get to it is to understand, okay, the problem in front of me is something that I get to tackle and win.
Well, I look at it, my problems I've created.
Yeah.
Because I've grown businesses. But then I always think when I get bogged down, I go, well, I'd hate to be like Fortune 500 company.
Yeah.
But then you get somebody else to worry for you.
That's it. That's exactly right. Exactly. So you just want to make sure that it's like Elizabeth Gilbert said, you're eating the poop sandwich that is worth it for you. Everything has a poop sandwich. Which one are you willing to eat, right?
Well, I don't know what's worth that or a frog.
I know we're talking. So the last thing I want to say is examine your social circle. There is a 95% chance that the people that you're hanging out with, you have similar scores in success, happiness, health. If your friends are smoking, you're more likely to smoke. If your friends are sitting around and wasting their time, it's much more likely that you are too. You're going to want to surround yourself by people who are actually going to support you and where you're going and not where you've been.
Just real quick, somebody asked me the other day, how much do you think you're worth? I said, I have no idea.
Priceless.
Yeah, I have no idea. It's irrelevant to me.
Yes.
All
love
right.
that.
Good topic. We'll see you again next week. Today's social media segment is brought to you by Alford and Associates for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.